Well, it's not beast mode in Los Angeles. Instead, it's Beastie Boys mode, as the mayor is apparently auditioning to be some square antagonist in an 80s music video, reviving decades-old cheesiness as sincere and relevant modern political advocacy.
You gotta fight for your right to party!
And in LA, that fight is going to be sweaty. You'll be fighting from a poorly lit sauna after Mayor Eric Garcetti shuts off your power for disobeying his coronavirus whims. That is the reality for a group of rowdy TikTok stars at their defiant party house in the Hollywood Hills. Garcetti had been saying he would cut off the utilities of the corona non-compliant since the outbreak and the lockdowns began back in March, but as far as I can tell, he actually rarely or never did it, maybe because non-compliance was fairly rare, or maybe because it's such a drastic and draconian step to take. He renewed his warning in early August, but never actually punished anybody that I can find. Until those damn kids started flaunting it with their TikTok videos. Was it the actual non-compliance that set the mayor off? Or was it just the parading of it? It seems the show is what finally prompted LA's dictator in training to take action, rather than the disobedience itself. Because TikTok stars Bryce Hall and his friends surely aren't the only Los Angelinos with less than strict adherence to the mayor's whims. They're just the ones who advertised it most aggressively. For the last few weeks, the group has hosted large parties with over 100 people in attendance at their home. Violation notices placed on their door started on August 8th. There was another one on the 14th. Presumably there was a third strike this week, and the mayor announced Wednesday that the reign of TikTok terror is finally over. Citizens can finally sleep and shoot up in your cardboard shanties in peace now that Garcetti has finally settled the city's most pressing issue, shutting off power to the party house. And the only thing wilder than the parties is the hypocrisy. A few things to consider and confirm. This has nothing to do with the consistent application of the rules, and everything to do with the mayor cracking down on some thorns in his political side. Because rowdy mass gatherings in Los Angeles aren't a new outburst from the restless TikTok youth. They're the norm, and they have been for months. And protest attendance isn't in the hundreds, it's thousands. Body to body, filling the streets effectively every week of the summer in numerous neighborhoods across the city. Oh, but they're wearing masks, are they? Are they, though? Are they really? Regardless, the lack of masks wasn't the issue with the TikTok party house. That wasn't the nature of the citation. It was simply the fact that the gatherings were happening at all. And yeah, LA is the second biggest city in the country. There are millions of people there, and I can't expect perfect compliance from everyone. And I can't hold the mayor responsible for every piece of wrongdoing from every unknown protester. But I can hold the mayor accountable for himself. So where was his citation when he participated in the protests unmasked? Where were the citations for the unmasked protesters in plain view all around him? Was the power shut off at any of the homes of the people pictured here? Was the power shut off at the city block that was the site of this blatant corona recklessness? If not, why not? Maybe because that'd be cruel and legally dubious, he might respond. Correctly so. Trouble is, though, if that's the justification for you and your friends, the same reasoning must apply to your enemies to have any credibility at all. You can't claim that public health is a vital, universal interest to protect and then weaponize it against people you don't like. That's why it's awfully odd for the mayor to crack down in this way in the name of public health, while the National Weather Service is issuing an excessive heat warning saying those without air conditioning are at heightened risk with temperatures climbing into the triple digits this week. I'm gonna punish you for disregarding public health risks by disregarding public health risks? Okay, that's not about public health. That's just a show of force, nothing else. And it's a show of force the mayor had previously said he would never use, or at least wouldn't use in other circumstances. Back in May, the mayor announced there would be no utility disconnections for people who were unable to pay their bills during coronapocalypse, which is probably the best defense strategy for these kids. Just go delinquent on your bills. That's actually rewarded in Los Angeles. That and advertise your next house party as a memorial service for St. George Floyd and watch the AC suddenly kick on full blast. Now, like me, you may be wondering how this is even possible. How can the mayor order the power company to comply with his silly whims? How does the mayor have the authority to intervene between the power company and a paying customer? Well, silly me and silly you for thinking this was a private arrangement. This is California. Eric Garcetti is the power company, or at least the city is. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is the city-owned and operated utility, and they have the barely functional 90s website to prove it. The board who runs the city's power and water is all Garcetti appointees. And that's the point the blue-check Garcetti apologists will emphasize. Oh, well, it's the city's power. If you don't like the rules, they don't have to serve you. Yeah, great. Except it's a monopoly. There are no other power options in town. It's Garcetti volts or nothing. Typically, free association means I'm free to associate with someone else. But in LA, someone else is banned. Besides, we typically think of freedom of association as a right of the individual, not as a government weapon to wield as punishment for a supposed crime. And when we do punish people for crimes, what gives that punishment legitimacy is the due process afforded to the accused. It's very fashionable right now to think that the Constitution has some coronavirus opt-out clause. It doesn't. And regardless of whether our drift away from the document is technically legal or not, just philosophically, we betray the principles of the Constitution at our own peril. Scrolling through the replies to the mayor's announcement of this power-cutting move on Twitter, it's a pretty even split of people arguing whether the punishment fits the crime, whether these parties were wrong, and whether cutting the power is an appropriate response. But all of these debates miss the point. You can argue that these TikTok kids did absolutely nothing wrong. You can argue that they're stone-cold grandma killers. You can argue they deserve to party all night, every night, totally unrestricted. You can argue that they deserve the death penalty. But all of these judgments are secondary to the question of how we make these judgments, the process we use to make these judgments. There was no due process in any piece of this story, not in the definition of the crime, not in the definition of the penalty, and not in the judgment of guilt. And that is the point. The crime was not defined by any traditional legislative process, just by the whims of a mayor under his supposed emergency authority. But even that authority is meant to be temporary and subject to continued legislative review. It appears the mayor follows that process about as strictly as he follows his mask rules. When he feels like it, he does it. But when he doesn't, shut up and obey. The punishment was not defined by any traditional legislative process, just by the whims of a mayor who saw a sword and decided to pick it up. There is no precedent for this move. A city councilman just floated the idea and the mayor ran with it. It never actually passed through any ordinary lawmaking process with city council. It was only proposed. The judgment of guilt was not rendered through any traditional judicial process. There was no trial. There was no jury. There was no evidence presented. Indeed, I have seen no evidence to show that these TikTok mansion parties transmitted even one case of coronavirus. It is all conjecture, with Eric Garcetti as the self-appointed judge, jury, and executioner. And maybe in this context, that doesn't matter that much. So what? So some rich, rowdy kids in the Hollywood Hills have to sweat it out in their nocturnal sauna for a while. Who cares? Yeah, maybe, but we'd all be wise to learn the lessons of this story while the consequences are still relatively minor. Because this isn't just a story of a little inconvenience as punishment for bad behavior. This is a story of just how quickly those who declare everything a human right will turn around and tell you to shut up and get in line or have your human rights revoked as soon as you give them the power to do so. Because it's not just electricity that's a human right in Los Angeles. Healthcare is a human right. Housing is a human right. Water is a human right. These are all declarations from the same mayor who omitted the footnote that these human rights are subject to revocation as soon as you step outside his strict boundaries for your behavior. The tyrant will always bait with what he can give you, because what he can give you, he can take away. His promises are simply control mechanisms. I will give you X becomes I will take away X unless you do as I say. And maybe we don't much care when X is air conditioning or loud music at the party, but how about when it's your healthcare? How about when it's your water? How about when it's your home or your property? How about when it's any meaningful aspect of your life for which you have handed over control in pursuit of lofty promises of security and prosperity? This is a story of petty tyranny, yes, but the lesson isn't petty at all. The things they promise us today are the things they take away tomorrow if we yield the control to do that. In the meantime, crank up the AC and the Beastie Boys while you still got them. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chatting my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.